Well, hey guys, it's Mrs. New here. Welcome back to the pottery room. Today we're going to be starting our name plaque project. So we are going to be working with flat slabs of clay. We are going to be illustrating our name in an interesting way and also sharing a symbol or something about ourselves in our design. So let's go ahead and get started. Showing you different designs and ideas in class for the name plaque project. But what I want you to understand is that you are going to be illustrating both your name and something about yourself. So this could be a symbol, this could be a picture. Here's mine, Mrs. New, with my paintbrush here. Maybe it's your favorite cartoon character. There's all kinds of different ideas. So think about what you're passionate about. Maybe you're passionate about sports, athletics. Maybe you're passionate about theater arts, drama. Whatever it is, try to find a picture of something that you're inspired by. So to start this project, we're actually going to be using the computer as a tool, and we will be using just Google Images to find some pictures, and then we're going to be using just a Google Doc to create our lettering as well. So I will be showing you how to do this in class. We will be heading to the Media Center to print out both our text and our picture, and so that we have kind of a template for our design. So once we have this pattern, what it looks like on the paper is going to be pretty much exactly what it looks like on the finished piece of clay. So here's just a few examples that I pulled out of my file here. There's one for Weston, who was into elephants. Here's one for Liam. This was a little boy who liked different construction vehicles. Here's one for my own son when he was just a little boy and he was really into puppies. And Claire really liked Curious George. So think about how you can incorporate your drawing into your lettering and really come up with a fun and interesting design. So once you have your design all picked out and printed out or drawn up, the next thing you need is a slab of clay. Now we've already learned about how to roll out a clay in a different video, so I will link that video in the description so that if you're not sure how to roll out a clay using the slab roller or hand rolling out a slab, you can watch that video first. So once you have your paper design printed out, the first thing you want to do is cut away some of the excess. And by the way, it's totally fine if your wording and your picture are on two different pieces of paper. It really doesn't matter. But I am going to cut away some of the background. All right, that's much better. Now I can really see the two pieces I'm working with and decide what my layout will be. Do I want to have my plant up on top, underneath, on the side, or maybe I want to even have it sort of behind my text. So I can play around with layout now that the pieces are a little bit smaller and easier to deal with. When you're cutting a piece of clay for this project, you're either going to use a nice big tube of clay from the extruder, or from a fresh bag of clay, you want to cut about 2+ inches. So probably about that much of a piece. You don't want it to be teeny tiny and too small because usually these take quite a bit of clay. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my clay and get it rolled out and through the slab roller and ready for the project. So before I go any further with this slab, I'm going to find a rib tool that has a nice smooth edge, and I'm going to take that rib tool and just slowly drag it across the clay. This does a couple things. This smooths out all the texture from the canvas cloth. It also will make sure to compress your clay to make sure there's no air bubbles in your clay. Now, if you're using a nice fresh clay out of a bag or from the pug mill, you don't have to worry too much about air pockets, but if you're combing the clay like this and smoothing it with that rib tool, if you see anything that looks like a little bubble, you want to get in there, pop it with the needle tool and smooth it out. So I like to do this step before I start to transfer my design from the paper. Now I'm going to go ahead and decide, where my shapes here are going to live, and I might decide to poke one design and then the other. So for instance, I think I'm going to go ahead and poke my lettering first. So when you're going to poke the design, just take your piece of paper and gently smooth it on, and it will stick a little bit to the wet clay surface. Now with my needle tool, I'm going to pretend that this lettering is actually a shape, and I'm going to poke through the paper around the text to transfer this design onto the clay slab. It's kind of like those pumpkin carving kits that you might see around, Halloween time. Sometimes there's books and patterns that you can put onto the pumpkins to carve. So you might be familiar with this trick. But basically, I'm poking through the paper. Now, I'm not going all the way to the canvas cloth. I'm just poking it just enough so that I can see the design. So you want your holes to be not too close together and not too far apart. So kind of someplace in between. Now the paper might rip a little bit when you pull it off of here, and that's okay. And right now is where you're thanking yourself for printing out text that is nice and big. So again, more scripty fonts are going to be a little harder. Nice straight fonts might be a little easier, and your text needs to fill a piece of paper horizontally so that it's easier to transfer. If your printout is too small, this part is going to be really hard. So you might need to back up, go back to the library, and make sure the text is nice and big and easy to read so that you can transfer it onto the clay. Okay, so I've got most everything transferred here, and now I'm going to go ahead and peel up my paper. Okay, so hopefully you can see that I do have the design on there pretty well. I can see it pretty well. Now I can decide where I want, my plant to be, or maybe I just use this as a reference and sort of draw my own thing. You will notice though that I didn't put the text too close to the edges. I want there to be lots of room so that I can decide what my exterior shape is going to be. But now I'm just going to go ahead and poke my design of my little plant pot. So I'm going to go around this shape. And then for the leaves, I might kind of freehand that a little bit more because I want the leaves to be kind of behind the text. Now another trick you can try with the needle tool, which I'm doing now, is just to kind of press against the paper and not actually poke the holes. Sometimes that will work okay to transfer the design, but I think it's a lot easier to see when you poke the holes. So you can kind of see the difference there between the leaves and the pot that I did. So the next step in this project involves a nice sharp wooden pencil. So what I'm going to do is kind of like when you were a little kid and you had those connect the dot books. Now I'm going to have my picture up here so I can kind of remember if I get a little lost with my pokey marks. What I'm going to do is take the pencil and kind of hold it to the side and drag it through the clay, going over the top of the pokey marks and trying to erase those marks as I go. I also take my fingers and I remove from the pencil tip the clay every so often because I am sort of carving this out. So I stop, I take that clay off, I drag through, I'm trying to erase those pokey marks, I take the clay off, and then just carefully keep going until I have my letters carved on here. So if you do have the paper copy still, that is helpful, again, in case you get a little lost and you're not sure, especially with mine being more of a scripted font. I'm not sure, what part is what here. So because I have my printout still intact, I can use that to help me have a reference. Now, if your printout gets kind of ripped up because maybe it got a little wet or something like that, sometimes that happens too, and that can be. So sometimes you don't have it to sort of help you with this part, but just do the best you can to try to get your lettering carved on there so that it is legible. And now I'm going to go ahead and draw on sort of this pot shape of the planter. And this first, time I do this, it is kind of a rough sketch. So I could go in and add more details and things later. Now I'm going to look at my design again and sort of decide what my leaf shapes are looking like. And I'm just sketching it on. Now if I make a mark and I don't like it, I can just take my finger and just erase that. But consider this first drawing that you're doing on clay kind of a rough sketch. Okay, so you can always go in and make changes. Now this clay that I'm using today is very soft, and so I want to wait to do most of my carving until this clay is more what's called leather hard. So we'll be talking about the stages of dryness with clay, and really, I can't do too much carving today. So again, I'm just trying to get my design kind of sketched on here, but I'll be doing more carving next class. So that's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. Now, eventually, I'm going to go in and make sure none of those pokey marks are showing, and I'm going to make sure they're all smoothed out. But for today, that looks pretty good. And now it's time to think about the exterior shape of my design. Do I want it to be a square? Do I want it to be round? Maybe I want it to have, a flat bottom and be rounded at the top. So there's all kinds of different exterior shapes that you can do. You could do a cloud shape. Think about what your design is. And my suggestion would be to draw it on there first. So my design, I'm thinking it would have maybe a straight bottom and kind of a curved top. So in order to draw a straight line, I'm going to grab a ruler. Now I don't want to put this too close to the edge. I want to give myself a little bit of room here, but I do have a lot of extra clay down here I can get rid of. So goodness knows I can't freehand a straight line. So I'm going to use a ruler, and there's a straight line. And again, if I was just doing a rectangle, I would just measure this out and do a straight line all around. I think I'm going to go ahead and do a straight line. Again, I'm not doing it right next to this M. I'm pulling it out and giving some room here. Okay, because I have the clay to do that. Now if your slab wasn't big enough, then you'd have to figure it out. And then I think for the top, I'm just going to do a nice kind of curved shape. And again, if I draw that and I don't like it, I can just blend it out and draw it again. I haven't cut anything yet, but I think that looks pretty good. Now another thing to think about is I'm going to need 2 holes up here for hanging. So I could just mark those now, making sure I have enough clay up here, making sure those holes wouldn't be too close to the edge. But once you like your exterior shape, you're going to go ahead and just cut it. So since I've made all the marks first with my pencil, I'm pretty confident now to go in and just carefully, cut this shape away. So my suggestion for cutting your exterior shape is to draw it first and then cut it. Okay, so now I can remove all this extra. Now before I store this on a bag, I am going to get a wet sponge and just smooth out my edges. Again, I don't want any sharp edges. This can be very sharp when it's fired. So with a wet round sponge, just a small one, take a minute and kind of smooth your edges out and make sure everything is nice and rounded and there's no sharp edges. So the last step I need to do for today is to put this on a wear board. So a wear board is just a nice flat board, and we have lots of them in the class. I'm going to gently transfer this, and then I'm going to slide the whole project into a bag. That way, next time when I come in, I can work on doing the carving for this project. So the whole thing will go in a bag, and I want to be sure I take the ends of that bag and tuck them under so no air gets in there. Kind of get all that air out of there, and this can go right in my cubby drawer. All right, folks, well, that's as far as I would get on day 1 of this project. So with my design already printed, I was able to roll out my slab, poke the design, transfer the design, draw it on with a pencil, cut the exterior shape, and get it onto a wear board and into a bag. So next class when I come in, I will continue to work on this project. So I will be taking it back out of the bag and I will be adding more details. I also have to carve something on this project. So I have to take a loop tool and actually scoop out some of the clay of this design. So I have to think about where on this design I might do some carving. So it's really important that your project get leather hard before you start doing the carving process. I would not want to do carving with a loop tool today. I'm going to put it back in a bag and wait till next class period. Also, a few more finishing things I need to do here. I need to make sure that I poke both my holes. I need to make sure none of my pokey marks are showing. I might want to add a border. I might want to pop out some shapes and have some shapes popping out and carved in. So there's a lot more that I can do to this name plaque next class. All right, so my project has been on a board and in a bag now over one class period, so basically over one day. And now as I'm coming in, I'm realizing that my clay is getting more what's called leather hard. So I can pick it up and it kind of keeps its shape. Now it's not bone dry, but it is getting a little bit more stiff and set up. So now is when my plaque is perfect for carving. So on your name plaque design, part of the requirement is that you have to carve something. So drawing it on here with a pencil is not considered carving. We're just drawing the line. But to do carving, what you need is a loop tool. So a loop tool is a tool that has a loop on one or both sides. So here are a couple examples of that. These ones are bigger and you can see they have different tips. Sometimes the tip is rounded, sometimes it's more square, sometimes it has a point. So it kind of depends on what you're doing, what kind of tip you might need. And then I also have loop tools that look like this. Now I call these the baby loop tools. The reason they're the babies is because the loops on them are really, really tiny. Let's see if I can pull one out here, show you. So that loop is really, really small. So we do not put these loop tools in with the normal bins of loop tools. I actually keep these on my desk. And if you want to use one, you have to check it out and check it back in. And the reason for that is because of this. They get broken really, really easily. It's just unfortunate. So you can see I have a little piece in here. That's a broken one, right? One that broke. What's nice about the baby loop tools is they are really nice for carving tiny little areas. But if you want to use one of these small ones, you have to come see me for that. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and grab just a loop tool out of the tool area. And I'm going to decide what on my name plaque I'd like to carve. So it doesn't have to be a big area, but let's say on my pot here, I've got my pot that my plant is in. Let's say I want to add, some texture and some design to this pot. So what I'm going to do is just take my loop tool and start to scoop out some of the clay. So basically that clay should kind of come off. It reminds me of like an apple peel, like if you were peeling an apple. So it should come off kind of like that, and it should kind of flake away. Now if your name plaque still feels like really sticky and stuff, it might not be quite dry enough. And if that's the case, then you can grab one of the hair dryers and you can speed up the drying process of your name plaque a little bit with a blow dryer or a hair dryer, and those are in the drawer. But I went ahead and did some carving here on my little planter. And when I scoop out the design, I want to scoop it out, pretty thick. So maybe I want to scoop out this whole area down here. Maybe I want to scoop out the whole shape of the pot or this planter down here. It really kind of is up to you. What I probably wouldn't want to do is try to carve all of the letters down. I find that that's just kind of hard to do, but I probably do want to recarve some of my lines here. And I also want to get rid of any of the pokey marks. So any of those little dots that you can see from where you transferred your design, you want to get rid of those. One way that you can do that is with a wet paintbrush. So now that I've carved this a little bit, I can get in here with a wet paintbrush or just my finger, and I want to get rid of any of those little dots from the transferring process, because that can just look really sloppy on the design. So it's kind of this in between, smoothing things out and then recarving your lines. You can add a little bit of water back into your plaque if it feels a little dry. But let's go in with one of the baby loop tools into my designs of my leaves here, my leaves. So let's say on my leaves, I want to, take those shapes and I want to carve a little bit more, some patterns on the leaves themselves. So you can see carving is really fun. Go ahead and grab any of those little pieces of clay that come off of there and just take them away from the loop tool. But it actually can add a lot of like texture and depth to your design. So you want to think about, what on my design could be carved away. It could be a simple shape. It could be like I'm doing to add texture to the leaves. You have to kind of figure it out what it is for your design. And then I've also noticed like some of my leaf shapes are getting a little lost. So that's where I'm going to go back in with my pencil and recarve some of those a little bit deeper. So you want to have it be nice and deep and your design be nice and bold. And that way it makes it a lot easier when you go to glaze this work. If you have all of what I call those clay boogies, kind of get those clay boogies out of there. And mine's still a little bit soft. This goes a little easier if it's a little bit drier, but I'm still gonna, be working on mine here. So I'm going over my lines, I'm erasing any of the pokey marks, I'm doing some carving, and I'm really just, adding more detail to the design and making sure I can see all my letters clearly. And if there is, some of the letters that got a little messed up or something, you can always smooth them out and kind of redraw them on there and kind of work on your design. So really this part of the name plaque projects takes about another day. So it's usually about a day to like roll out the slab, transfer the design, and then about a day to do some of this carving work and some of this more fine detail. You really want these to look nice. And you want them to be legible when you go to hang them on the wall. Another thing that can look really nice on these name plaques is a border. So what I could do for a border is basically just draw another line kind of in from the edge, and it can pop behind some of the letters if they're close. And so like for instance, I could kind of come in here and draw like a line that comes here. Maybe the border comes down. I should probably be using a ruler, but maybe the border, comes down like this and comes across. Maybe the border comes up like this and around the top part, and then maybe comes down like this. What's also nice about adding that border is I could do some stamping. So I found one of the metal stamps actually has a leaf in it. So again, just to add some design and some texture, I could get in there with a metal stamp while this is nice and leather hard, and I could stamp in a pattern around the border, and that could look really nice in the design. So I'm going to go ahead and do that as I'm designing this. It's looking really good. I'm liking this, the way that it's looking so far, but I definitely have more work to do on it. Now, as you're doing this part, I also want you to, again, pay attention to this edge. Make sure it's nice and smooth. Get in there with a wet paintbrush, really smooth out the design. And so it's kind of this in-between smoothing and recarving these lines to make this look nice. But a wet paintbrush is another tool that's really important on day 2 of your name plaque design. Now, once I feel like I like my design pretty well, one of the last steps of the name plaque is to make 2 holes for hanging. So you want to add your holes kind of up here towards the top, and you want to make sure that they're even. There's a couple tools you can use for making your holes. One is this little green container that says straws. These are straws, and these work really well to punch holes as long as your plaque is not too hard. So let me show you what that would look like. I would just poke the straw in like this, give it a turn, and then it just takes out a little piece of that clay. Now make sure that that hole goes all the way through. So I can lift this up a little bit, make sure it goes all the way through, and I can see my red board underneath there to make sure it goes all the way. Another tool you can use are just called hole punches. They live in this white cup. And in here, there's two smaller ones. Now you can see there's all different sizes here. There's big ones as well. But I would want to find probably one of these two sizes here. There's a really tiny one and kind of more of a medium-sized one. So I'm going to use kind of this medium-sized one. And again, it's about the same diameter as the straw, maybe a little bit bigger. And what I can do with this one is just push it in here, turn it like that, and take out that little plug of clay. And that will make a nice, holes for hanging. You want to have two holes, not just one, because we're going to put a wire here, or you could put a pretty ribbon or a string in order to hang this on the wall. So here's a mistake I see kids make sometimes, or students, I should say. Sometimes people will take a needle hole, or a needle tool, I should say, and just poke a hole like that and then pull it out. Well, that's not going to be big enough to string anything through. Also, when clay dries, it shrinks about 25% in the kiln. And so when this shrinks, it will just shrink shut. And there's no way we can put anything through there. So don't do that to make your holes. Do not use a needle tool. You want to either use a straw or one of the hole punch tools to make your holes for hanging. Once you have your holes for hanging and your name plaque is looking really nice, it's all smoothed, it's carved nicely, you've spent some time carving the design, then it can go ahead and go on the greenware shelf to dry. You can leave it right on the wear board and just take it over there just like this to dry to bone dry. To be careful of when you are carving is to make sure not to carve too deep. So for instance, the bottom of my vase here, I carved that pretty deep. If I go too deep, I'm going to put a hole in my name plaque. So you can see I only have about that much thickness to carve down. So be a little careful of that when you are carving pieces out. If you're carving out a shape or a design, make sure not to go too deep or you're going to end up with a hole in your plaque. If that happens, come see me, or just get a little bit of soft clay with some slip and score and kind of make a little patch and patch it back up. Also, when you're cleaning up from your name plaque, make sure to get all those little clay pieces and scoop them up into your hand or into like a little sweeper. I have some little sweepers in the class. Make sure to get all these and put them in the garbage can and don't just sweep them onto the floor. So have a lot of fun with this name plaque project, you guys. Think about what your design's gonna be, make something cool, because you're gonna be having it hanging on your wall for years to come. So I hope you guys have fun with this project, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.